Last week, I was going through my daily routine of catching up on the news when I came across the headline that unfortunately I've become all too familiar with seeing. It was another dire warning from climate scientists that due to our dependence on fossil fuels, the Earth is hovering on the brink of irreparable damage. It isn't just the Earth we are damaging, however. According to a study from Harvard University, globally, 1 in every 5 premature deaths can be attributed to fossil fuel pollution. In fact, that same study found that in 2018 alone, over 8 million deaths were directly attributable to fossil fuel pollution. Now, I want you to imagine a world where the energy that we need for modern life is cheap, it's abundant, and it is completely carbon neutral. You may not realize it, but that world is completely possible today with nuclear power. Today, I'd like to address some of the misconceptions surrounding nuclear, as well as hopefully change your perception on this type of power generation. So we will start with the question that I'm sure you're all wondering. If nuclear power is so great, why isn't it everywhere? Well, the truth is there are a few misconceptions about nuclear power. The first is that nuclear power is inherently dangerous and that it is a hazard to public health. This stems from 3 nuclear disasters that have occurred through the decades. The one we're all familiar with is Chernobyl in Ukraine, but there is also 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania and Fukushima in Japan. Now, Chemical and Engineering News reports that over the entire 50-year lifespan of nuclear power generation, there have only been 5,000 deaths attributed to nuclear power plants. This is significantly less than the 8 million in 2018 from fossil fuels. The second misconception is that nuclear power is damaging to the environment. The reality is, nuclear power plants emit 0 emissions. Now, William Hummel of Claremont College points to the fact that mining for nuclear ore can leave tracts of land radioactive, and this is true. However, with responsible mining practices and government regulations that enforce cleanup operations, mining for nuclear ore will be no different than mining for any other toxic substance that we currently mine for. The third misconception regarding nuclear power is that nuclear waste is an unmanageable problem. The truth is, according to the Argonne National Laboratory, that all of the nuclear waste ever generated throughout the history of nuclear power generation could fit on a single football field stacked 10 yards high. Nuclear waste is incredibly easy to manage and very safe, and nuclear power plants produce very little of it. Now, I'd like to share with you some graphs that I feel demonstrate better than I can how safe nuclear power really is. Now, these 2 graphs take into account the entire life cycle of the power generation. This means they take into account the dangers from mining the resources necessary for nuclear power. They also take into account the construction of the infrastructure associated with nuclear power, and they take into account the entire life cycle of the power generation. Now, the first graph here demonstrates the amount of fatalities per terawatt hour of energy produced for different types of power generation. On the left side, the larger bars all correspond with different types of fossil fuels. So we have coal, oil, natural gas, peat, and biofuels. We can see these are the much larger bars on the graph. On the right side, the very small slivers of bars correspond with our renewable energies. We have solar, hydroelectric, and wind power generation. And the smallest sliver of a bar on the far right at 0.04 deaths per terawatt hour of energy produced is nuclear power. This tells us that nuclear power is an incredibly safe option. The second graph demonstrates the mean number of deaths prevented annually by use of nuclear power. And we can see in 2010, nearly 80,000 deaths were prevented by using nuclear power. So the more we adopt nuclear power, the more deaths will be prevented annually. So why is nuclear power so important today? Why is it so relevant? Well, the fact is, as human society continues to advance, our energy needs advance with us. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, since World War II, the United States energy needs have tripled. Now, fossil fuels are still the primary way that we generate electricity, and they are killing us. They are killing us and they are destroying our planet. If we do not change course and change the status quo of power generation, the consequences will be dire. So, what can you do? Well, for starters, you can be an advocate for nuclear power in your daily life. Spread the word, spread what you have learned in this presentation. And when you hear misconceptions being talked about out in the world, correct them with the information that you have learned here today. Now, in conclusion, I want to leave you with a couple of questions. After having heard the information contained within this presentation, how many of you, by show of hands, would be comfortable living next door to a nuclear power plant? I understand if you still have some reservations, but how many of you would at least be comfortable living in the same state or county as a nuclear power plant? Well, thank you for listening to my presentation. I appreciate it. I hope I have changed some of your perceptions, and I hope you have a wonderful day.